Imagine you buy a phone, just a phone. But 6 months later, you own wireless earbuds, a smartwatch, a laptop, and you're paying monthly for cloud storage, music streaming, and TV shows. Nobody forced you. Nobody pressured you. You just kept buying. That's not a coincidence. That's one of the most brilliant business strategies ever designed. This is the story of how Apple turned a simple product into a trap. A very beautiful, very expensive trap that over 2 billion people happily walked into. Apple generated $416 billion in revenue in 2025. Let that number sink in. But here's the thing that makes that number even more fascinating. Apple doesn't just sell products. They sell belonging. They sell a world that works so seamlessly together that leaving it feels genuinely painful. And that's not an accident. It's a strategy that Steve Jobs planted decades ago, that Tim Cook perfected, and that competitors have tried and failed to replicate ever since. So how exactly does Apple do it? What's the machine running behind the curtain? Let's break it down. To understand Apple's ecosystem, you have to go back to 2001. That's when Steve Jobs introduced the iPod.
Boom. That's iPod. I happen to have one right here in my pocket, matter of fact. There it is, right there.
And while everyone celebrated it as a music player, Jobs saw something bigger. He called it the hub of a digital lifestyle. His vision was simple but radical. What if every Apple product made every other Apple product better? The iPhone launched in 2007 and changed everything. But even then, Jobs wasn't just thinking about a phone. He was thinking about an anchor, a device so powerful, so personal, so deeply embedded in your daily life that everything else you owned would naturally orbit around it. And it worked. By 2025, the iPhone still drives 50% of Apple's total revenue. It's still the center of gravity. But here's where it gets really interesting. Apple didn't stop there. They quietly built an entire universe around that anchor and monetized every corner of it. Here's the core of Apple's strategy, and it's beautifully simple. Every product Apple makes is designed to work best with other Apple products. Your iPhone syncs seamlessly with your Mac. Your AirPods switch automatically between your phone and your laptop. Your Apple Watch only reaches its full potential when paired with an iPhone. You copy something on one device, it appears on another. That's called Universal Clipboard. You walk away from your Mac with your iPhone, it locks automatically. That's called handoff. These aren't just cool features. They're invisible chains. Comfortable, elegant, invisible chains. And the more Apple products you own, the harder it becomes to imagine life without them. Research shows that 80% of iPhone users own at least one other Apple product. And every additional device you add increases your switching costs by 15 to 20%. Think about that. With every AirPod purchased, with every iCloud plan activated, with every Apple Watch charged on your nightstand, Apple becomes harder to leave. But Apple didn't stop at hardware. They built a services empire on top of it. Apple Music, iCloud, Apple TV Plus, Apple Arcade, Apple Fitness Plus, Apple Pay, and then the masterstroke, Apple One. A single subscription that bundles all of it together, making it incredibly cheap to go all in and incredibly painful to cancel. By 2025, Apple's services segment generates over $107 billion a year. That's 21% of their total revenue, and growing fast. Over 1.1 billion people pay Apple a subscription every single month. This is recurring revenue, the holy grail of modern business. Let's talk about the part Apple never advertises, but absolutely relies on: the lock-in. When you use iMessage, you're not just texting. You're participating in a social system. Green bubbles versus blue bubbles. It sounds trivial, but research shows peer pressure from blue bubble group chats has actually driven Android users to switch to iPhone. That's not a feature, that's social engineering. Then there's iCloud. The average iPhone user has over 12,000 photos stored in Apple's cloud. Years of memories. Moving them out is possible, but it's painful. and most people never bother. Your health data from Apple Watch, your app purchases from the App Store, your passwords in iKeychain, your workflows built around macOS. Leaving Apple doesn't just mean buying a new phone. It means rebuilding your digital life from scratch. This is what Harvard Business School calls ecosystem premium capture. You're not buying a product. You're buying membership in a system. And that membership is worth roughly $8,000 in lifetime value per customer over 20 years. The numbers confirm it. Apple's customer retention rate sits at 92%. Compare that to Samsung's 77%. 92%. That means for every 100 people who own an iPhone today, 92 of them will buy another Apple device when it's time to upgrade. Not because they have to, because leaving feels like too much work. That's the strategy. Delivered with beautiful packaging and a minimalist logo. But Apple's ecosystem strategy isn't without its problems. In March 2024, the US Department of Justice filed an antitrust lawsuit challenging Apple's entire ecosystem approach, arguing that the very integration that makes Apple great is also deliberately designed to crush competition. Regulators in Europe have been even more aggressive. Apple faced a $13 billion EU tax ruling, a $95 million Siri privacy settlement, and mounting pressure to open iMessage, the App Store, and core services to competitors. There's also a growing consumer backlash. People are waking up to the lock-in. They're asking, is Apple so good that I love it? Or am I trapped and just used to it? And in 2025, Apple Intelligence, Apple's big AI push, has faced criticism for being slow, underwhelming, and behind competitors like Google and OpenAI. For the first time in years, Apple's moat isn't expanding. It's being questioned. Despite the challenges, Apple isn't standing still. The Apple Vision Pro signals where Apple is heading, a spatial computing future where the ecosystem becomes not just something you carry, but something you inhabit. If Apple gets that right, the lock-in doesn't just deepen, it becomes your entire reality. Apple is also doubling down on health tech, blood glucose monitoring, advanced ECG, mental health tracking. If your Apple Watch becomes your primary health device, if it saves your life, you will never leave this ecosystem. And the chip strategy continues. Apple's custom silicon, from the M series in Macs to the A series in iPhones, gives them a performance advantage that no competitor running off-the-shelf chips can match. Control the chip, control the experience. By 2026, Apple's AR products alone are projected to generate $10 billion annually. The ecosystem keeps expanding. The walls keep getting taller. Here's what makes Apple's strategy truly remarkable. It doesn't feel like a strategy. It feels like a lifestyle. Nobody buys a second Apple product because they calculated the network effects. They buy it because it just works. Because life is a little easier. Because the friction disappears. That's the genius of it. Apple built a business worth nearly $3 trillion, not by building the world's best products, though they did that too, but by building a world where their products make each other better. They didn't just sell you a phone, they sold you an orbit. And once you're in it, everything else feels like gravity. The real question is, are you a customer? Or are you a subscriber to the Apple life? If you're watching this on an iPhone with AirPods in your ears, on a couch next to your MacBook, I think you already know the answer.